Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. If everything is running smoothly, you should all be able to see the Fit2work screen at this point in time. Just to let everybody know, we do have the question and answer tab up in the top right-hand corner. I have a colleague of mine, Angus Nichols, our partnership specialist, that is going to be manning those questions, so do feel free to ask anything you like. Otherwise, you have got the public chat in the bottom left. The purpose of today's webinar is very much to discuss about some of the key changes that are going to be taking place with your upgrade over to the Fit2work platform. What I'd like to do is, I guess, talk a little bit about why this upgrade is taking place, then run through some of the key customizable changes that are taking place and available to you on the platform, and then, I guess, talk a little bit more about the next steps. If we talk a little bit about why this change has come about, as a wider organisation, we did a bit of due diligence at this time, actually would have been about May, June last year, in respect to what the Verify platform's capabilities are and its ability to be as smooth as possible moving forward. That's when the decision was made as an organisation to go down the path to actually purchase and acquire the overall Fit2work platform and in turn the other parts of that organisation. The reason that we made that decision is its ability to cater towards technology primarily. So candidates and as well as organisations like yourself are able to perform the checks as well as respond to the checks on mobile phone and tablets. But it's also going to be a lot more adaptive when it comes to additional checks that we are going to add on, as well as changes which you no doubt would have all been aware of with the legislation changes that took place at the end of the financial year. What I might do now is actually jump in and log in as if I am yourself and go through what some of the home screen elements are, some of the customizable options that are available on the website, and then actually go through and conduct a check itself. And the key elements to this is to show you some of the simplicities that are involved in the process. So perfect. Logging in now. So if I talk a little bit about now this main home screen, one of the key changes from the Verify platform over to Fit2work is the transparency as to where the check progress is actually up to. One additional feature that is available to you is what we've called here the future dated. A lot of organisations use this when there's an appointment made that an individual is not starting for several months, which is going to then allow you to put the submission in now and then actually dictate when that release date or when the actual email to the candidate will actually get sent out. Value of this is when somebody does start in 2-3 months' time, that you do get a police check, for example, as close to that starting time. If necessary, you can always come back in and delete that check. As it hasn't actually gone off to the government, you haven't actually been charged at this stage. If I now run through the remaining 4 tabs here, what that's actually referring to is the process or the progress as to where it's up to once a police check, as well as other checks you can see lower down here, has actually been sent through to the individual. Now, the information that is dictated within the brackets here is all about the steps that have actually been taken. So employee to complete means that they've received the link, however they haven't actually logged in and actioned it. If at any stage there is any issues, you can obviously go through and reference the email address that it's gone through, delete that particular check if necessary, because one of the key changes between the Verify platform and the Fit2work platform is that there's no expiry on that link that's getting sent through to the individual, where some of you may have received minor issues in respect to those links actually expiring within a 10-day period. We will also send through to the candidate reminder emails on a daily basis, but we've seen it to be quite a useful tool that if necessary, if you're speaking to the candidate, you can actually jump in and send a one-off reminder email to them. In the progress, if an applicant has actually started to complete the information but hasn't actually submitted it because there is a save and exit function, that will fall into this tab. And again, referencing that information regarding the brackets here as well. Once a candidate has actually submitted their information, that sort of step into this stage or this tab. Now the actual workflow, what will happen at that point in time is that our team within South Melbourne and soon to be within Brisbane will actually go through and vet that information just like it is done in their Verify platform at this point in time. They'll go through and vet that information, make sure there's no blurry images of any IDs, make sure there's no mishit keys. If there is, they will act on your behalf to actually then request for the candidate, for example, to re-upload their driver's license or passport image. They will do that on your behalf, ensuring that it removes that administrative burden from yourself. Once that has actually returned, like it has in this respect here, they'll get alerted of that, fulfill the criteria, and they'll actually then send it across to the ACIC. Because it still hasn't, if we're talking specific to a criminal history check, because it still hasn't actually been sent off to the government, you still have the option to actually go through and stop or delete the particular check if necessary. What I might do at this point in time is talk a little bit about some of the functionality associated with the new platform. And if I go firstly up here to the Tools section, you can actually go through and add on your own authorised officers. A key component to an authorised officer, which is a legislation requirement, is that every authorised officer must have performed a police check in the last 12 months. That's irrelevant as to whether it's through Fit2work or another agency. It's just a key component that's associated with actually getting that. We've also got quite a lot of reporting functionality available that you can see here. There's already quite a bit of predetermined, otherwise a customised reporting that you can go in and request. But if I specifically go to the Library tab, and what I'd like to do is touch on firstly in relation to the Packages section. So these packages, if I scroll down to the bottom and start on this particular area here, Manage Email Invite Templates. As no doubt you'll be aware that at the moment on the Verify platform, you can't govern as to what the email communication is. What you can do is just actually accept with it within the Verify platform the existing email. Within this new one, you can go through and not only delete what's already currently there, but you can go through and then add anything you wish or edit what's currently actually in there. A great feature about this is that organisations actually utilise this functionality to talk a lot towards putting in individualised messages, either relative to the job family, if not to your organisation. So what that's going to help you to do, a lot of businesses will talk about next steps, if not talk a little bit about some of the ID criteria. As you're no doubt aware, it used to be 100 points, now it's 4 forms of ID. So you can go through, and as long as you adhere to the rule of thumb up top here, you can actually put in as much or as little information as you wish in respect to these emails. Now, the template name is an internal use only, but the subject line and obviously the body is what's going to be getting sent through to the individual. Another key component associated with this is actually going to be the Manage Check Packages. If I go through and add in a package, now you may recall that at the moment if you needed to create, modify or delete a particular package, you had to then get in touch with us. The way it works on the new platform is you can title it whatever you like and then go through and select or deselect any particular check that you wish. And if we talk specifically to the qualification, you can actually go through and then stipulate how many qualifications were actually going to be you wanted us to check for you, as well as employment history. At the moment, it's a feature of either number of employees or years. But that's definitely available to you. Now, with respect to the international residency, I'm not too sure how many of you actually take care of this at the moment, but you can then go through and stipulate if they have lived within another part of the world for 6 months in the last 10 years is the most common. However, I know of organisations that have gone down, have modified that to be as much as 1 year in the last 5 years. It's completely up to you. What this international residency does is it actually then allows the candidate to actually say yes or no to this question, and you can then go through and determine how you actually then want that to be handled. So, for example, the approval process required, what that's actually going to do is that's going to then send an email through to the individual that's actually performed the police check, has done the original request for the police check, and it'll get them to approve it prior to these additional police checks getting added on. And you can see that there's actually quite a few different international checks that are available there. For this particular example, I'll just turn these ones off and cancel it. But as I said, you can always go through. If we look at this particular one here, MPC, you can always go through and then edit and modify any particular package, if not just completely delete them if you wish. And another great component there is that you can actually then see what your minimum amount is associated with that particular package. Another area that I really wanted to touch on before I do then talk about actually the performance of a check is around this purpose field. Now, you may or may not have been aware in respect to some of the changes now. As you can see, these purpose fields are actually incorrect. One of the legislation changes that took place as of the financial year is the requirement for an individual to put in the state title and a brief description of the individual's role that is actually getting the criminal check performed on there. Obviously, if you're not doing a criminal check as such, then this isn't a key requirement. But you can also go through and then add this information in. Now, the reason that we've done this is you have the option when performing a check to either select from a drop-down box, if not, free text that information, and I'll show you a little bit more about that when we move on through to doing a police check itself. One key final area that I wanted to touch on that talks a little bit towards all of these different tabs here and the progress that the checks are actually up to. Well, over time, it's going to obviously get incredibly difficult to go through and search through all of those different tabs. If you just put in their surname, as you can see, it'll then bring up all of the checks when they were done associated with that particular name and let you know what stage it's actually up to. What I might do now is actually go through and create a criminal check. And the reason that I'm talking a little bit more towards the criminal check is I think for this example, I'll show you a little bit more on how easy the other checks are, but I think I might just do that in respect to making things nice and simple. Now, one of the key elements which was available on the Verify website was the bulk invite. A key difference that we've put on here is a check file format, and the reason that we've done that, for example, the file format that you download is actually CSV file. It gives you the option to put in their first, middle and last name. Sometimes when that data is actually pulled, it can move all the information over to the left, for example, if there isn't a middle name. And check file format will ensure that everything is all aligned properly and allow you to go through and do a whole bunch of people all at once if necessary. Now, if we look at these tabs just very quickly before I create the check, in short, check type is actually referencing to the organisational request in the check. Basic details, check details, and review is actually then the stages that the candidate will go through and fulfil. So at this point in time, if I go through and enter in my details, one of the great features that we are now able to offer all of you is that when you actually put in an individual's email address, due to the quantity of police checks that we've done in the last 8 months, in the last 9 months, just in 2018, we're actually giving you the opportunity that relative to your internal policies and the result date, that if you wanted to go ahead and accept a past police check, so for this example, the 16th of August, all you need to do is actually click on Request to Release Check Results. What that'll do is send it through to the candidate an email saying, in this example, Stephen Menzies has requested for you to release your past check results. And once they approve that, that'll actually come through to you and ultimately is actually going to be for free. The reason for that is because you're not re-performing a police check, you're accepting an old police check. And that's why we're giving you this option, because of the sheer quantity of police checks that we've done in the past. Now, a key element associated with that is where you actually go through and accept or deny those that limitation of how old that police check can be. What I'll do is I'll cancel that and roll through as if I am creating my own police check. Now, I was talking about those packages earlier, and that's where these are actually sitting. So if I clicked on Executive Management Finance, obviously you can see all of these coming up. For this particular one, though, I'll go through and just select the National Criminal. Now, I wanted to touch a little bit more about some of the upcoming checks that we have. Now, as you can see, when you're clicking on this word in here, it'll open and expand any of these particular areas. What we're actually going to have coming up, which will ultimately fall under this other database check, is actually going to be driver's license checks, whether or not they might be of interest to you, but also going to be then professional memberships. A lot of organisations, for example, will use that regarding their finance people associated with CPA memberships. But also then ultimately, like we've got a psychometric checks here, we would then have also behavioural reference checking available as well. So that's for further development that's taking place on the platform. If I scroll down even further again, just wanting to touch on this work group point here. As you can see at this point in time, it talks a bit about the cost centres. A lot of organisations will use that as cost centres, if not then locations, departments, projects, clients, wherever these particular checks need to get allocated off to. And what will actually ultimately happen is that the invoice will then get split out associated with whatever these key definitions are. If it turns out to be a point that you only have some checks associated and others you don't actually, as you can see, it's no red asterisk, it's not a mandatory field. It'll just then mean that all of those that haven't been allocated to a work group will just get clustered together and sent through all as one section within the invoice. If I scroll down to the very bottom, the completion method, we do have quite a lot of organisations that either have quite a mature workforce that aren't incredibly tech savvy. They can go through and do a handwritten consent form. Alternatively, to reduce the administration to yourself, we can go through and select at this point in time the applicant to complete the consent form online. Like I referenced earlier on, everything with the red asterisks is all of the mandatory fields. So if we go through and fulfill these details. Now, a lot of businesses, before I go into the next stage, forward result to applicant, this is completely optional to you. A lot of organisations will do that if they know that their employees are actually conducting volunteer work, for example. But this, and as well as the applicant to pay online, is also completely optional to you, and we can go so far as just completely remove this from your account when we do an account configuration. I was talking a bit about the purpose field, which we're all aware of in respect to some of the changes that have taken place. If, for example, it's a one-off role, that it doesn't actually fulfill any of the criteria within that, we can go through and then do a manual entry here. Dealing with bank accounts, for example. Now, another key component that changed as of the legislation changes with the start of the financial year was then the access to vulnerable people. Now, the access to vulnerable people is quite a broad definition because that also then includes those under the age of 18, as well as those with either physical or mental requirements also. So then it's a matter of actually determining which one of these three you would be associated with their role. And again, with the email templates, you can actually go through and either select, so if we just go new employee, otherwise if we just go renewal, you can have as many or as little email templates, if you even want any at all, associated with this. So I'll just do a very quick recap. Realistically, all of it done is the name and email address, either selected from the package, if not selected the actual checks themselves, and scrolling down to the very bottom, just going through and selecting these final few areas. And that's actually brought us to the completion of then performing a check. So it's actually trying to be even more efficient than what the Verify platform already is at this point in time. So what's actually happened at this stage is now the email has actually gone across to myself. requested me to actually go through and complete this check. So knowing the platform well enough, I know that my request is actually now sitting in this tab here, as you can see, from the 3rd of September, and it's now waiting for me to actually go through and complete. If I look at this second one down, for example, and I say I don't want that to go ahead, all I need to do is just obviously select delete. Yes, and it's completely removed and you haven't actually been charged for that. And the reason you haven't been charged is that it didn't get finalised, nor did it get sent off to the Australian Criminal Investigation Commission. So what I might do at this point in time is actually log out of the organisational perspective associated with this and actually log back in as a candidate, and then take you through a little bit in respect to what the candidate experience is in regards to performing these police checks. So if I now log in, now because I've already set up a profile prior to now, that's why it's got such information here as my mobile number and email address. And candidates, especially in the healthcare space, actually use this quite a bit because we do work with quite a lot of organisations in both the health and aged care areas, as well as then with quite a few universities as well. But all they would get is, if they were to have asked to share the result, the very first thing will be a pop-up box just saying basically approve or deny. What we might do at this point in time is actually click to complete, which is the request that I've just sent through. Now this screen here, I do want to expand on that, but let everybody know on the call that this is completely optional. In fact, we can go so far as to just deactivate this screen. A lot of organisations do like to use it from a little bit of a further information, if not a bit of an integrity test. Obviously, if some of these questions come up saying, have you previously been convicted, and you're doing a criminal check, then it's going to come up in that. As I said, it's completely optional to you at this point in time, though. We'll go through and say no. Now, because of the changes in a lot of organisations, a lot of individuals being very familiar with the 100 points of ID, we really want to express to them as to the need about doing the 4 forms of ID here. Now, if we scroll down just to talk specifically to the candidate information, I don't know if you recall, but actually when you're requesting to check, the middle name is optional. In regards to here, the reason that we've actually made it mandatory is because for the likes of John Smith, if they actually have a middle name of Stephen, then by doing a search of John Stephen Smith, A, it's going to help to speed up the process, but B, it'll also ensure that we've got the right individual as well. Hence why they either need to put in their middle name, if not stipulate that they don't have a middle name. Beyond that, the key points of information that we're talking about here is just the standard information about oneself. Now, we've really tried to make, again, this as simple as possible, hence why we've got predictive text, for example, in respect to the countries there. And the other thing that we've entered in to help reduce information, misuse of information here, is actually the email, the addresses are actually associated with Google Maps to make sure that all of this information is true and correct. If I step over to the next page here, one thing I just want to very quickly touch on is that save and exit function. If they do hit save and exit, they can always log back in at a later stage. This is utilised quite a bit when, for example, if they don't have their full 4 forms of ID. What do I do now? Previous names or addresses, yes or no. Now, the 4 forms of ID, one of the key elements associated with this is really ensuring that we give the candidates as much option to be able to fulfill this as simple as possible. So if we look at category A, we've actually got quite a few different here. For this example, I'll do birth certificate. Category B, you can go through, you've also got quite a big list here, and if it gets to the point where they don't have any one of these, They do have to enter in a reason as to why they don't, but also it then just gives them another option to be able to fulfill the 4 forms of ID. So we're trying to get as much of a workaround to make things as smooth and simple as possible. If I now, at this point in time, you can now see category C is actually quite a lot longer list than the others. If I then go through, for example, I do a Medicare card and an Australian passport, what I'll then do is hit next. And what we've actually done here is we've got a couple of different features. Now, the reason that we're doing a selfie function, which you may be familiar with the Verify platform, is to help avoid the need to actually do certified IDs. The secondary component that we've got associated with that is you can actually go through and either send a link through to your mobile phone, which obviously was information entered earlier on, if not upload a pre-taken selfie associated. So what I will do is I will just move on through to the next tab for this particular example. Now, the reason it allowed me to do that is because I'm actually in the demo site, but obviously they would have to actually take the selfie holding up a particular ID. Now, because I've stipulated in the IDs that I am uploading, that's why it's now only allowing me to request Australia. If I now go through, now, one of the key points here, ID sample, as you can see, it's entered up as a PDF. Because the system is much more capable to mobile phones and tablets, the file type that's getting uploaded can actually also be a huge array of file types just because of the amount of technology that is out there at the moment. If I go through and add in these final 2. Now, with these, the individuals completing these checks must have had these on 4 different files. They can't have just one scanned copy of all different IDs, which is already a standard process in respect to them completing their checks at this point in time. But if I now click over to the next tab, and now it's just quite literally a review of all the information that I've entered in as the candidate. And then the key elements here, as you can see, it's a mandatory field, but it's reiterating to them what checks are actually going to be performed and allowing them to then do a online signature also. At that point in time, as a candidate, once I've fulfilled this information, I just hit submit, and that's taking care of the application. Now, obviously, if we did do additional checks, such as professional membership, driver's license check, qualification check, it would then ask them for that type of information, as well as adhering to then those stipulations that you made, for example, only 3 or 4 employment history checks, for example. So what I'll do now is just log out of that and log back in as the organisation. And knowing the system, I'll then show you where that check has actually fallen across to. So this is the check that I've actually just gone through and completed right now. So what the process is that our team currently in Melbourne as well as soon to be in Brisbane will then go through and vet that information. They will then take any further actions if necessary, if it was missing any information or blurred images, and they'll do that on your behalf, again removing that process from you. But in regards to the sharing of those past checks, this is where that will actually fall through. So again, if you actually went through, in what we can see here, Banks is the surname of that particular one. If I go through and do a search, you can see here that was where that particular check has now come in. So you can actually go through and click on that particular report. There's a couple of different functionalities even just within that. The summary report will quite literally just give you a very brief snapshot overview of all of the checks that have taken place. And as you can see about the legend down the bottom here, if there is any key areas that we would recommend to look further into. So a directorship check, for example, is all about doing some due diligence on is an individual a director of any other organisation? Do they have any shares with potentially organisations or a conflict of interest? And that may have actually picked up something that we've found there. However, if I go through and just hit download the report so we can see at this point in time, Stephen hasn't done anything illegal in this respect, hasn't got any criminal convictions. What will happen, like you know at this point in time, on page 2, it'll actually go through and stipulate what, when, and the outcome of any particular criminal checks, for example. At this point in time, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about some of the next things to come, because I've actually come to the end of the demonstration on the platform itself. The reason that I've been able to do that so quick is, to be honest, it is a very quick platform, very simple to use. Now, everybody is obviously who has joined us today will have seen at the bottom of the email that you received, there is a contact us area. So please do feel free, beyond the questions anybody has asked, that if you want either some more demonstrations, if not some more queries, please feel free to reach out. A couple of things to expect: that between now and the time that the upgrade actually goes ahead, it is business as usual. There's nothing that you need to do. At the time of the upgrade, a week before that, we'll send across a reminder about this, as well as send some additional training material for you to review if necessary. I know there's quite a lot of people within organisations that have attended this, and maybe only one of several authorised officers have been able to attend, so hence why we're sending out that training material. But in respect to when your upgrade actually goes ahead, on the day of your upgrade, you will be sent your new login details. And that's actually all you need to do. We'll take care of everything else in respect to any past checks. They will all move across, so you'll be able to then go through and search any of those. You'll also be able to then already review and see what packages that have moved across from the old platform over to here and modify them if necessary. So there actually isn't anything between now and your upgrade that you need to do. As I said, it is business as usual. If necessary, we also do have another webinar taking place next Tuesday. You're welcome to either rejoin us, if not let colleagues know that is a webinar available to you. Otherwise, at this point in time, that has actually concluded our webinar on the Fit2work platform. Not only myself, but obviously our team is certainly more than available to talk to you more about some of the functionality and changes that are taking place between the two platforms. Otherwise, I'd like to thank everybody else for your time. But I guess at this, sorry, I'm just getting asked right now that if there is any key questions that anybody would like me to talk about, if not answer, please feel free to ask them, and I'll give a few minutes between now and the end of the call to be able to address any key questions that some people might want immediate responses to. Otherwise, everybody, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. This concludes the webinar for today. As I said, within the bottom of the email that did get sent through, there is the ability to either send through some specific questions if you have them. Otherwise, there will be another webinar next Tuesday. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Take care.